and today is the 15th of August, and we are somewhere between Shoreham and Petersfield. I don't actually know where.
Near Bramber, I think.
Near Bramber, sat next to an empty horses field. And it's day one of the trip. Hello and welcome to the Extraordinary Ordinary Women podcast, sharing life's adventures. My name's Frankie, and this is a podcast where I interview extraordinary, ordinary women and non-binary folk as part of a 3,000 kilometre cycle around England, Wales and Scotland. Interviewing people older than myself to show that you don't just have to do it whilst you're young. You'll hear all about their adventures and what they get up to, as well as their answers to my big life questions. Like, what does authenticity mean? Did you have a clear sense of direction through life? And what advice would you give to your younger self? This is episode 2, where I interview the incredible Charlotte Fowles. A life coach, a diver and a hiker, she tells us all about her many, many adventures. We cycled together before the interview from Shoreham by Sea to Bramber on the very first day of my trip, chatting all things life, coaching and my fears about setting off. We pulled off into a small bridleway to do the interview. You can hear the birds in the background and there is an occasional car, but I hope that doesn't deter from Charlotte's amazing stories and the powerful advice she gives. So obviously I know you, I know you quite well, but for people that have never met you before, can you just give us like a snapshot of who you are and what you do?
Sure. Hi everyone, I'm Charlotte Fowles and I am founder of The Executive Adventurer and I am a transformational and corporate executive coach.
Amazing. Wow. That sounds huge. What does that mean more on like a day-to-day?
So what I find is usually my clients are successful people who have got there, in inverted commas, and they suddenly are thinking, oh, like, now what? You know, I've got the thing, I've got the stuff, I've got the promotion, you know, got all the things I thought that would get me what I thought I wanted, and I'm okay, but... So they might be looking for something more purposeful, they might be looking for a promotion, they might be not even know what they're looking for, but they're like, they got something, they might be frustrated, they might be bored, they might be lost, and they might be feeling any of those things. And when they come to me, I help them figure out what is the now what.
And is that something you've done for quite a while, or how did you get into that?
So I've been doing elements of coaching in my job for a number of years. Before that I was in communications and I worked for central government for many, many years. I was press and events officer to Chancellor Gordon Brown many years ago, and then I worked in the Department of Health and I worked in the Treasury. So dealing with successful and very, very high profile people on a day-to-day basis. But when I was leading teams, I had a coach style to my management style, and I really, really enjoyed helping develop people and finding out what they needed and helping them get there themselves. And so this kind of led me, without a too long story, to be exploring coaching. And so then I trained a few years ago and then set up my own business, and here I am.
With that, can you tell me a little bit about like what the work-life balance looks like?
Of my job, my life now?
Yeah.
This is absolutely incredible. So I now have created exactly what it is that I always wanted. And one of my coaches used to say to me, she hated the phrase work-life balance because A, the word work comes first, and B, work is just such a big part of life. So it's your life balance. And I thought that was a really interesting way of looking at it. And even for those of us who adore our work, you know, it's part of our whole life and we spend a lot of time with that. And I know you and I had a conversation before about writing lists of things that you want to achieve and goals and sort of manifesting. And I really feel now that I'm kind of there. I live by the sea, I've always wanted to live by the sea. I've lived by the sea a couple of times, and then I was in London for a bit, which I also loved. But now I moved back to the sea, and for example, this week I got up before my working day, if you like, my client day started. And I cycled down to the sea, which is only 15 minutes. I had a swim. I did my meditation by the beach, and then I came back and I had breakfast, and then I saw my clients, and then the day goes from there. If I want to do that in the evening, I can do that in the evening, and I can have holiday whenever I like. And yeah, I've managed to create the life now that is one that I love every day. And last year I managed to take 6 weeks to celebrate my 40th birthday, and to travel to 5 different countries, and to do all of this whilst I was on chemotherapy. So it's been a really incredible privilege to have all the opportunities and to work towards creating this.
That sounds amazing. What an incredible life. What an amazing lifestyle.
I feel really privileged, and I've had an incredible amount of what other people would call bad luck over the last 10 years, but I also acknowledge I have a lot of privilege to start with as well, and that doesn't negate any of the work that I've put in or any of the hard work, but clearly there's many things that give me an advantage, and I'm always extremely grateful, and I do quite a lot of work with myself to make sure I sort of acknowledge and check my privilege as much as I can.
Yeah, absolutely. And it also sounds like you've put in a huge amount of hard work.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've enjoyed it, and I think it's work that doesn't feel like work. Like, that's what some people want, and I guess again I'm a little uncomfortable with that, because that suggests that work has to be something you don't enjoy, and I don't believe that it does. But it feels like there's huge purpose to it, and that it's useful to people and it helps them, and I get to share a part of their joy and their success, and I get to see them evolve, and that is wonderful.
You mentioned chemo, and I do want to come back and sort of talk about that later, but before we do, can you talk to me a little bit more about like the outdoors and what you do in the outdoors?
Sure. So the outdoors, it's just everything. I love being outside. There wasn't necessarily always the way. I mean, I always liked to run about and have fun as a kid and stuff, but I didn't grow up in a household that did loads and loads of like camping and activity holidays or anything like that. We had great times, but that wasn't so much a part of my upbringing. But I moved to Australia, I think it's 12 years ago now, and as part of being there, I wanted to experience a lot of stuff, and it forced me to do much more outdoorsy things than I ever had, and I felt super, super in love with it. And I already did quite a few bits, like hobbies before, but this was more incorporating into my life. So we bought an old four-wheel drive, and I basically drove that almost across the entire of Australia or through the outback. And there's only 1 or 2 5-star hotels in the outback, so you have to camp. Which, before that, I think the last time I pitched a tent was when I was in the Girl Guides, and I was a rubbish guide. I was terrible. I got almost 0 badges. So it wasn't, didn't come natural to me, but I just absolutely adored it.
And how long ago was that?
So that was 12 years ago. And then came back and fell in love with four-wheel driving, fell in love with camping, fell in love with even more with the outdoors. And I've done so many incredible adventures since then. Like, I've been so lucky. But again, I've sought this out for my holidays, and these days I think that's more normal. People have less of the kind of stay in one place type of holiday, although that's great for sometimes, we all need that. But it was a lot less usual back when, and a lot less opportunity to do it. And people used to say that, oh, your holiday sounds awful. Because I'd be like, oh, well, I'm going trekking in Nepal, and then we've got like a jungle safari, and then we're doing whitewater rafting, and then I'm coming home. They're like, that just sounds horrendous.
That does not sound like a rest at all.
But it was, they say change is as good as a rest, and there's so much about the outdoors that has kept me sane over the last few years, and also it's like a safe space. It's very interestingly, people have asked me, aren't you scared, on various things that I've done, and occasionally I have been, of course, because I've had to learn, but occasionally when I wasn't very well, it felt safer for me to run off into the night and bivvy by myself, like in the middle of nowhere, than to be in a room full of people.
And why was that? Why do you think that
At
was?
the time, I was suffering with depression, and I'm known usually as quite sociable, and I like to be around people, and I like listening to people, and I like being with people. But I remember being in this, it was just a family and close friends sort of event, and it felt like the most unsafe place ever. And like, that was obviously, my brain was poorly and I wasn't well, and yeah, I just wanted to be where I felt free. And that's one of my biggest values, is freedom. So both the life that I've created and the reason I keep working towards it is a driver. It's a driver for me to keep getting more freedom, and the outdoors feels so free.
And what does freedom look like to you?
So freedom is, to me, there's many things. So when I was a kid, I was, I felt naughty a lot of the time because there was lots of rules about not doing this or doing this. And I wasn't a rule breaker for the sake of it, but it was like, if the thing stopped me having fun or doing what I wanted to do, then I would just do what I wanted to do. And I guess that was me in freedom. And I wasn't being intentionally bad. It wasn't like, oh, look at me, I'm such a rebel breaking the rules. It was like, this doesn't make any sense. Like, why can't I run around with my friend? Like, why wouldn't you just do that, And perhaps this curiosity has also led me a lot into coaching, to start questioning all these things that we've grown up believing are, in inverted commas, rules, and to start questioning them. And many of them, rules that keep us safe, that's fine. But some of the other things we think of as rules are actually, they're not rules.
I agree so much. I always think that like one of the worst reasons to do something is because that's what you've always done, and that's the way it's done.
And people that make change are often the people that question the way something's done, and they're seen as weird for questioning it, and then suddenly they invent the next big thing. Or I heard a really interesting phrase when I was working with a coach, and I think it was one of his clients who said the opposite of courage is not cowardice, it's conformity. And it's like my favourite thing to remember. That doesn't mean that if you want to do what other people are doing that you shouldn't. It just means that if you are doing it because you think you should, it takes a lot of bravery to step out of that.
Yeah, for sure. I'm going to come a little bit back into your journey into the outdoors again. So you went to Australia, and then you came back from Australia, and then did you jump straight into camping at home and being outdoors at home, or?
Again, it was, I saw it as easier to do in Australia because, the weather's great, but actually, myth, everybody. I lived in a few different places in Australia, and I was there for a few years, and I travelled around a lot, and they have a lot of rain, And in fact, one of the first times we went on our holiday, after we'd been working really hard before we then got our next jobs and worked really hard, was, let's take 2 or 3 weeks and we'll drive up the East Coast and we'll camp and it'll be great. Started raining the day we left, did not stop, bar one afternoon, for 3 whole weeks. 3 whole weeks it rained every day, and camping in that rain was less than fun. I was not amused. What had previously stopped me in the UK, like, the weather's not great, I was like, well, if I managed to survive that, then I could survive. So when I came back, I don't know that I jumped straight into camping here, but certainly incorporated a lot more of the outdoorsy things. So I'd already done a lot of walking before we left for Australia, and did a lot more walking, and then deliberately took like holidays that were a bit more adventurous. So like the holiday in Nepal that I've mentioned, kayaking in Sweden, going for 3 weeks in Japan, doing a whole variety of stuff, but planning it and doing it yourself, which again, way back when wasn't as heard of. So I tried to incorporate it wherever I could, and became obsessed with the weather. Because, if it was going to be good, I was like, right, let's make the most of it. Let's get out and cycle or walk or do something, go down to the coast when we lived in London. So tried to be out as much as I could.
Amazing. And as you were like sort of really just getting into it, did you find that there were many sort of challenges or barriers?
Barriers, way back when, some barriers might be cost of some of the equipment. Some of the other barriers are you're mainly your own. Like, am I doing it right? Am I doing it wrong? It's just so interesting to me that there's so many cliques, and there's so many groups, and there's so many people that have so many opinions about what is right and what is wrong. And I didn't find that very helpful. What I love at the moment is that there seem to be a lot of groups that are supportive And my focus would always be to say to someone, make sure that you know how to keep yourself safe, and you know what you're comfortable with, and push it a little bit. But safety is important. There's some clear do and don'ts. Leave no trace. Respect the environment. All those things. But everything else is preference.
Absolutely. We were chatting about this last night, about how you can be obsessed with gear and having the perfect bag to cycle, and then the perfect bag to go running, and then the perfect bag to go hiking, and actually you just need a bag.
Yeah, there are definitely some things make things more comfortable, and that's great. But it is very interesting, because I'm a scuba diver, and I've scuba dived for many, many years. So that's how I used to get a lot of my outdoor interaction as well, to be around the water. And I've been doing that for a long time. But I learnt to freedive as well last year. And what is very interesting is I love them both. And they provide some very similar things, but they are very different. But even within that, some people are like, oh, well, you must prefer one or the other. Or, oh, well, once you've done that freediving, you never go back to scuba diving. Oh, well, I'm just like, well, I don't think that is true. And people act as though these things are truths. So they become truths for them.
And then probably become truths for other people, because that's what other people
say. And within scuba diving, for example, there's people that prefer this, people that are very animated about this, and everyone is entitled to their view. But you just quickly sort of realise that very few things are so black and white as to this is right and this is wrong, or this is the right way and this is the wrong way. Most things live in the grey, which we know anyway, but it's quite, when you're new to something, I think it's quite difficult to have the confidence to question stuff.
Yeah, completely. Scuba diving and freediving both sound amazing.
They are.
Tell me, how did you start? Where did you go? What do you do?
Oh, I could talk about this forever. I won't. If anybody wants to hear me talk about scuba diving, I did do like a Q&A for Adventure Queens a while ago, and it's on YouTube. So yeah, you can look it up there while I just sort of wang on about how great it is. But it is amazing. I do really feel I feel with scuba diving like I feel with coaching. So once I had coaching and knew what it was and knew how magic it could be, it's how I feel when I'm diving. You see the most beautiful world. It's like you see things with new eyes. It's like another planet. You start thinking, oh my God, this is amazing. And I want to yell at everybody who doesn't dive, why aren't you down here? Like, I don't understand. Why wouldn't you come and look at this incredible stuff and feel these incredible sensations? And I kind of feel a bit like that with some of the coaching, It's a bit like, why isn't everyone doing this? Why doesn't everyone know how great things could be? And it's great to be passionate about it. But I started in Egypt, I want to say 16 or 17 years ago. I went there because, again, we all evolve, but I traditionally don't really like to be cold. And lots of people again, oh, you could dive in the UK. I was like, I don't want to. It sounds really cold. This is a long time ago. And also for me, I found that if you're a bit more comfortable in physically, it's easier to learn things that you know nothing about and you're less comfortable with. So, you're pushing one comfort zone at a time. And for me, if I'm going to be shivering, freezing cold and thinking, God, when this is going to be over, I'm not actually going to take in the information. I'm probably not going to enjoy it. So I wanted to give myself the best chance to enjoy it and to fall in love with it, because I knew it would be a challenge. Because there's a lot of mind things that go on with being under the water and learning all the science and stuff. So went to Egypt where the water was like 28, 30 degrees, and had an incredible instructor. And yeah, found it quite challenging the first day, but it was so determined I wanted to do it. I wanted to keep trying. And then as soon as I got into the ocean, because you start in a pool, and that felt very claustrophobic to me, and it felt a bit weird, and I wasn't able to control my buoyancy, so I was going all over the place. As soon as I got into the ocean the next day, it felt completely natural. So yeah, Egypt is very special to me because it's the closest place to the UK. You can get there relatively cheaply. You can dive relatively cheaply, and they're all they're very strict about how you dive and protecting the marine life and doing it in a good way, and that's important too.
Yeah, completely. You mentioned at the start about chemo. Is that something that you're happy to talk about?
Yeah. So it's 15th of August now, and I have been finished with the chemotherapy for, I think it's about 3 months. And I had to have a year's worth of chemotherapy, and it was in tablet form. So again, I was very grateful for not only all the treatment and the incredible doctors and nurses, but the fact that it was different to other forms of chemo, because it meant that I had a little bit more freedom. But it did mean I had to have it continually for a year, which sucked. I had gone to get a itchy mole checked out, and it turned out that it was skin cancer, and I had to have a big chunk of skin cut out of my back, and they took some lymph nodes from my armpits and my groin, and that was a much more major operation than I thought it was going to be. That was the 1st of April last year. And it turns out they had spread into my lymph nodes, or started to spread. And it's really important, if people listen to this or into the outdoors, that you wear factor 50 the whole time and that you cover up. I'm very fair-skinned. I was always really careful. When I was in Australia, I wore factor 30 or 50 all the time, and this still happened to me. So please, everybody, check your moles. Please just go and get anything checked out. It's also one of the cancers that can spread to the brain quickest, so it's important to be skin safe and vigilant and look after yourselves. So that was interesting, because I was turning 40 that year and I had all these plans and I had to redo all the plans. I still did an incredible amount in the last year, and I went to some amazing places and did amazing stuff, but certainly the chemotherapy made everything very, very difficult.
What sort of places did you go to? What were you able to do?
So before I started the chemo, I remember saying, how long till I can travel again after I'd had the operation? Yeah, but when will I be fit? When will this heal? Because I actually ended up with an open wound on the back because it had to heal itself. And they were like, this amount of time. So I think it was about 7 weeks after, and yes, you can swim in the sea, they said to me. So 7 weeks after, I was like, right, before I start chemo, I'm going to go on holiday. So I went to Thailand.
Amazing.
And I learned to freedive there, did some scuba diving there, had a great time, came back, started the chemo, and I had no idea. Because it was tablet form, I think I almost dismissed the seriousness of it. Like, I just wasn't sure what it was going to be like, and the side effects were fairly horrible. But so if I was going to list all the stuff I did, so I did the freediving. I hiked the length of Dartmoor in 2 days with a wonderful group of women from the Love Her Wild community. I also went to the States to go to a coaching conference, and while I was there, I hiked the Trans-Catalina Trail, which I did over 5 days solo by myself, carrying all my stuff. That's an island off the coast of LA. When I got back, I hired a van and drove around California by myself for a week, which I was petrified about because I'd not really driven on the right-hand side of the road before, and I very nearly didn't do it, and then I did it, and within 10 minutes I was like, I don't know what I was worried about, this is amazing. And I had an incredible time. And then I basically redesigned my 40th birthday trip, and I went to, where did I start? I went to Malaysia, and then from there I went to Indonesia, into an incredible place of paradise called the Biodiversity Eco Resort in Raja Ampat in Indonesia, and I spent my 40th birthday there, and I was diving with manta rays and sharks and turtles, and it was incredible. Go and check out my Insta. The photos on there are just amazing, the footage I got. I was lucky enough to see a really, really rare albino manta ray as well, which was just ridiculous. It was perfection. After that, I went to Singapore for New Year's, and then I went to India and did some right down in the southeast, and did kayaking down there in this incredible little place down there. And then I went again on a Love Her Wild trip. I flew from there to Tanzania, to Mafia Island, and joined a research trip for whale sharks. So we were collecting data on whale sharks for 10 days, and just absolutely mind-blowing. It's incredible.
I mean, I was going to stop you 3 points in because I thought you had finished, and I was going to be like, wow, how did you fit that all in? And then you got to Thailand, and I was like, wow, how did you fit that in?
Yeah.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah, it really was. It really was. Like, I made it happen, but I felt lucky every day, despite, and this is some of the side effects, despite what I used to call my favourite surprise diarrhea, like fatigue, fevers, ulcers, like all the side effects. I didn't know that this type of chemotherapy can make your skin more susceptible to blisters. So when I hiked the length of Dartmoor, I'd never had a blister before in all my years hiking. It would be fair to say I don't think there was one single piece of the bottom of my foot or my toes that wasn't covered in blister. Like my feet were like one big blister. I lost toenails. It was just horrific. It was horrific. And then when I was in the States, I was paranoid, took all these Compeed and everything and got new boots, but the same thing happened because of the chemo. So I just had to, my feet were like in shreds. They were blistered. They were bleeding. Obviously I'd lost my toenails already and I just had to get on with it.
I've kind of got two questions, but like, how did you cope with those side effects? And did they ever make you want to not do it?
Well, I had kind of come to terms with the fact that, particularly the surprise diarrhea, was you know, if you have a cramps, like if you're going to have diarrhea, you think, oh God, I've got to get to the loo. That would often happen, but I wouldn't have it. So you didn't know whether you were going to be caught out or not. So it could be any time, and me and my sisters went to see Pink in concert last July, who was incredible.
Amazing.
I love her so much. Oh, I've been waiting to see her for about 20 years. And we went, and the journey back home was 90 minutes, you know, with 90,000 people leaving a stadium. And I started to not feel great stomach-wise, and I was sat on the tube, and I was feeling really ill as well. Like, the energy was low, and I was feeling really, really nauseous, very, very rough. And I just kind of was like, well, I literally can't get out of here. If I have a diarrhea accident, I'm just going to have to sit in it. Like, because there's literally nothing else to do. And it was also, it was really interesting. It's quite freeing once you realise that there's nothing you can do. That's it. I think it's quite a good motto for life, actually. When the diarrhea of life comes along, you just have to sit in it. You know, focus on what you can do something about, and there was nothing I could do anything about. So that experience really set me up for some of the travels. I don't mean I enjoyed it, it was good, but I was like, well, then if it happens, I'll clean myself up, you know?
Yeah.
I'll do something. I had a very close call in Malaysia, and I just made it to the loo. But again, I think some people say to me, what if something happens? What if you're ill while you're away? I was like, well, then I'll be ill. Like, and I wasn't being blasé, and I wasn't being stupid about it, you know, but I just didn't want it to stop me from doing the things I wanted to do. And you just never know. Like, my best friend who I grew up with, who's like my sister, she was called Mel, and she's absolutely fantastic, but she died at 36 years old, 36 and 27 days, and she died of breast cancer. And, you know, every day that I had, chemo side effects or not, was a day she doesn't get to have. And, you know, I just wanted to do these things, because you never know when something's going to come along and you're not going to be able to do them. So it was my non-negotiable. And I had, in fact, on my 40th birthday, I was knackered because I was up 2 nights in a row with what they called the chemo fevers, which I hadn't had up until then. I thought, oh, I've got away with it. I've had 6 months. I've been fine. I was not fine. But again, I was in paradise, and I dived with eagle rays that day. They just happened to come along, and, you know, even despite everything, again, on my Instagram, everything I tagged was just gratitude. I was just so grateful.
And how do you think your journey has shaped who you are now?
In many, many, many ways. So I think I like to call it my path, my evolution. Yeah, we're all constantly changing. Anyone who thinks they don't change is wrong. We all change. But sadly, I had depression in my early 20s as a result of an abusive relationship. And then I had depression again as a result of bullying from work. And then I was well for a long time, for about 12 years, doing all the things that helped me keep healthy in body and mind. But those experiences started to teach me about, the mind and the power of the mind, and also gave me a lot more empathy and understanding for other people. And from that, I was able to, become even more curious about people, and not just what holds people back, but how you can help people and all that sort of thing. So there was that. And then certainly Mel, I've always been sort of go at full pelt, do things, be enthusiastic, but certainly when I got to 36 and 28 days, I just remember saying every day is a day she doesn't get to have. And she was an incredible, incredible person, and she started her own business. She was a designer. She was so talented, and she made the most of the things that she had. And I thought that was such a great example. And I said in her eulogy, that was maybe her gift to, show us that we can do that whilst still being kindness and light to everybody. So that shaped me. Sadly, my dad died. It's 10 years ago this year when I returned from Australia, and that sort of set off for 10 years of trauma, if you like, because Mel died a couple of years after that. My granddad died. Basically, lots of people around me started dying, and it was again, it was a really, really difficult time. And during this time, I also had multiple miscarriages, and I had to have operations because they didn't miscarry themselves, and then I had to have investigations. And this is all very, very traumatic things. And it's now taught me a lot about resilience. So now, as part of my work, I actually do webinars and talks on how to build, increase, and stay resilient. And I've kind of had to, but I've been able to be still, during all those tragedies, successful and happy because I've used all these tools that I like to share with people. So.
Wow, amazing. I mean, thank you so much for sharing all of that. But what are some of the tools that you've taken away from it?
So, firstly, whatever we might like to think, nobody can do it alone. So your support is so important. And whether that's your family, your friends, your colleagues, your therapist, your mentor, your doctor, your consultant, your coach, if you need support and you can buy it in, look for support. And people like to help, so ask. I think we like to ask, but everybody likes to help, I find. And if you think someone has got something that will help you, then ask them, and you'd be surprised how many times people are happy to help you. And so drawing on those things and thinking about all the resources that you do have in terms of that network is really, that's always an eye-opener when people go through and they start writing all this stuff and they realise, wow, I actually know so much. Another tool is a thing I like to remember is that you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So choose them wisely, If what you need and what you need is encouragement, then choose people that will encourage you. There's a few tools which they don't really lend themselves so much to audio, but there's a sort of couple of diagrams and things like that, and again, exercises you can do that I do with my clients. But a tool that I really, really like, I heard the analogy in a book by a man called Michael Neal, who's a great coach. He talks about thoughts. And he talks about thoughts are literally just thoughts. And we say we know this, but none of us act like that because we all follow the train of thought, wherever it's going to take us, be that good or bad. And he says, thoughts, nothing happens to them unless you give them energy. And he uses the analogy of thoughts are like a tea bag. They just sit there. They're just there. They're dry matter in a cup. But when you put energy, in this case boiling water, onto it, it becomes something entirely different. So it might become a refreshing beverage. That's a great analogy because you can see how something completely changes. And I like to take it a step further and think about, you can either then drink that nice hot beverage, if you follow the train of thought and give it good energy, or you can tip that boiling water all over yourself. Which is what a lot of us do. A thought is there and it might not be a good one. You give it energy, you give the negative thought energy, and then you've just tipped boiling water over your body.
You start thinking about that one time that you didn't lock the door, and then now all of a sudden you're thinking about the fact that your house is probably burning down.
Exactly. And the spiral image is good as well, because if you think of a circle in the middle with circles going outside of it, you can spiral up or you can spiral down, but the thing in the middle won't change. So whatever that event is that's happened, or whatever that thought is, you have no control over that, but you can control every other layer after that. And there's quite a few things, if people are interested, to look on the internet around. It's called the spheres of influence. So again, focusing on the bits that you have some agency or control over. That's a really helpful tool, for sure.
I've got a question. I'm not sure if it's necessarily going to be relevant to your story or not, but I'll still be interested to ask it. But do you ever feel like you've been going against the grain sort of in your lifestyle and in your life choices?
Yeah, like now. So I do, because one of the phrases I find most interesting is when people tell you you're so lucky. And I find that very funny sometimes and ironic, because I've been extremely unlucky. Things have happened to me that I've had no control over and you could be characterised as bad luck. But now people would look at my life and say, oh, you're so lucky. And as you mentioned earlier, it's a series of choices that I've made that have been very much against the grain. And like I said, I acknowledge I'm extremely fortunate and I'm extremely privileged in many ways, but I have had to take those choices. So to take a leap to self-employment from basically almost the safest job you could ever have, I was in the civil service, and I went to a part-time self-employed role as a consultant, and that was incredible. It was really great, but so many people were like, oh, you're leaving, and they found it really worrying that I was going for something that was, in inverted commas, uncertain and didn't have certainty and all that sort of thing. So that's an example. That's kind of the lifestyle that I choose to have. It's not usual for everybody, and I like to remind people that everything's made up. So you think that the standard amount of, for example, holiday time in the UK is 4 weeks a year because that's statutory, right? Well, that's been made up. You could have 8 weeks if you want, and many people have 6 as part of their job. I think 8 weeks is like minimum for healthy rest and stuff like that, but everyone is different. But people used to get 0 holiday. So just remember that when you're starting to do something that is different or going against the grain, that's just, somebody made it up once and it just became the norm. But you can do that differently. It's a really interesting fact that I heard, which I haven't fact checked, but I will, is that people used to, years and years and years and years ago, there were lots of christenings on Christmas Day or Easter because that's the only days that people got off in the year. So people used to get like 0 holiday, and then it was normal to have maybe 1 day a week, and then the weekend was invented.
8-hour working days.
And now I think loads of people are finding, with COVID, the working week 9 to 5 in an office is no longer, why should you? And people are questioning it, whereas before they would just accept it. And we all do. We all absolutely do. But one of the best skills I think people can develop is curiosity. And where did a pattern start? Why did that start happening? And if I want to do something different, not, why shouldn't I, but how could I?
We're still sort of thinking about your journey at the minute, but what is one thing that you know about yourself now that you wish you'd known earlier?
That I am enough. Like, with everybody's spectrum of flaws and talents and skills and all the rest of it, no matter who you are, you're enough. And you're enough no matter what grades you get, and you're enough no matter what job you have. You're just enough. Just to exist is enough, and that you are of value. Wanting to do things of value is great, but just to know that even just as a being in this world, you deserve everything without even doing anything towards it. Just your very existence on the earth means that you deserve happiness. And I know that sounds really deep, but that has changed everything for me, because I no longer think, I only deserve it if I do this, or it's a bit like, I'll go for a big bike ride and I'll treat myself with an ice cream because I've earned it. Like, you can just deserve things, many things, because you are a human.
Yeah, and it's not just ice cream, is it? It's like love and money.
Absolutely.
And
you're worthy.
Respect.
I'm worthy of, I think there's a word that people like to use is abundance, but I'm worthy of love. I'm enough. Like, there's nothing I need to be, do, or have to deserve it more. Like, if I want to improve a skill, I'll improve a skill. If I want to learn something, I'll learn something. But that doesn't make me a better human being. That just makes me a bit more knowledgeable or a bit more skilled.
The next section is kind of all about like emotions and feelings. So to start off with, I kind of want to talk a little bit about like authentic self.
Mm-hmm.
And like for me, I kind of feel like every year I get older, I get like a little bit more my authentic self, and then I look back and I'm like, you didn't know anything.
We all do that.
Could you start by just saying what authentic self means to you?
I think you've hit the nail on the head there. It's what I like to call it is the massive and great big unlearn. So you're basically, we're born as our authentic selves, and then we learn all these things. We learn how to be in the world in which we're brought into. And none of those layers that we place upon ourselves are necessarily our authentic selves. Those how we've learned to be to please people, or how we've learned to be to get on in work, or how we've learned to be to keep a boyfriend or a girlfriend or a husband or a wife. All these things are things we've learned to think we need to do or be. And you're so right. When you unlearn them, it's like you're saying, oh, you learn a bit more about yourself, but what you're actually doing is taking off a layer of what you learned that actually wasn't true for you. And again, Michael Neal, he talks about people being diamonds, and I like to again take a stage further and say, like, it's as if we're all perfect diamonds. We're all shiny, we're all perfect, except diamonds are normally, you have to mine them because they're normally under layers and layers and layers of rock and sediment, and rock and sediment starts out as generally crap, right? So we've just piled crap upon ourselves for years, not with bad intentions, but with other people's expectations and with society's shoulds and all of this. And you start to, like I said before, you start to question, you start to get curious, you start to see what could happen if you decided to think something differently today, and you start to clean off that sediment, you start to chip away there, and your diamond starts to shine through.
I love that. I've read the same analogy. I actually read it in like Paul McKenna's How to Change Your Life in 7 Days.
Michael Neal was his coach.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And I really love in his book he uses the analogy that you've got a diamond and then you like throw shit at it, and then like the person you are when you're in public is like you trying to paint nail varnish over the top of the shit.
Yes. Well, you know, in communications, which was my first career, we talk about often you will be polishing turds. And one of the phrases, you know, especially in some government announcements, and one of the phrases I used to love was, you can't polish a turd, but you can roll it in glitter. It used to make me laugh a lot.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Do you feel like you're living as your authentic self now?
Yes.
Have you always?
No. This has been maybe 2 or 3 months, and I'm now 40 and a bit, and now I am. And that is... You asked me earlier what freedom meant to me. That is the biggest freedom. I cannot even express how incredible it is to accept yourself for who you are and then live that way.
From that, going to move on to bravery. What does bravery mean to you?
So I think I mentioned it earlier, you know, the kind of, the opposite of courage is not that you're a coward, it's that is the conformity, and it's really difficult to be brave in this world. You know, our brains are designed to keep us safe. You know, we are. There's a great book which many people know called The Chimp Paradox by Professor Steve Peters, and he talks about in the troop, if you're a chimp, you know, to go outside of that is danger, and so you conformed and you want to stay in the troop because you're stronger together, and that sort of works for our brains. You know, we're programmed to sort of suss out fear and to keep ourselves safe, and so it can take a lot of bravery to actually step outside what we think we should, which I hate that word, should be doing. And many people are not lucky enough to have good family or good role models or to have good bosses or good friends or things like that, and that could be a real challenge. I think we all know, we've all heard stories about, you know, kids or adults who just find one person who believes in them. Everybody needs one person who says, I believe in you, and then that helps you be a bit brave.
So much. Would you describe yourself as brave?
Yes.
Can you tell me about a time you've been brave?
So one of my biggest fears is heights. So this is a very literal sort of bravery here. But it was very comforting to know that we're only born with 2 fears, fear of falling and a fear of loud noises. So all other fears can be unlearned, which is very, very encouraging. But my fear of heights, it's just awful, absolutely awful. But a couple of years ago, I actually went to Montenegro on a weekend holiday, and I was canyoning and rafting, and I remember suddenly realising that canyoning meant jumping off stuff, like high stuff. I was like, why did I book this? I don't know what I thought it was. Like, I think it was, that sounds cool. And maybe I thought it was going to be abseiling. And they were like, you can abseil down the jumps if you want. I was like, yeah, well, I'm going to do that. Because they said, there's going to be like 9 jumps between a couple of metres and like 11 metres or something. I was like, that's just not happening. That's insane. I should also say that something that happened to me which increased my fear of heights was actually, after I had all my miscarriages, I wanted to focus on what my body could do rather than what it couldn't do. And I wanted to talk about miscarriage because it's such a taboo sort of subject. And I wanted to raise awareness of it, and I wanted to raise money. So I did the Tough Mudder, which is a half marathon, horrible obstacle course to raise money. I raised over £3,000, the Miscarriage Association, which is this tiny charity. And I got really, really fit and fit to do it. Except half a mile from the end, they had a faulty obstacle, and I fell 9 foot and I broke my leg in 2 places.
No.
So my positive thing turned into be not being able to walk for 3 months. So that then compounded my sort of fear of heights and falling. Like, even walking downstairs was scary to me because of the pain of I fell 9 foot. It was horrific. It sounded like a ball being hit by a cricket bat, and my leg was hanging off. Like, it was just horrible. So that didn't help when I was somewhere high or think about jumping off anything.
So then did you go canyoning after having already broken your leg?
Yes, but it was fixed. Yeah. So
still.
I want to say the leg break was maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and then the canyoning was 2 years. So yeah, it was a journey as well for me to really face some of that fear. And I didn't want to be someone that was scared of something I never used to be, like walking down the stairs or just jumping over a fence. So I tried to train myself to be a bit braver each time in my recovery. But this was just something I hadn't really put a great deal of thought into. And then I jumped every single jump. I know, there's video again, I think there's a clip on my Instagram of where you can hear me and the guy's giving me instructions, and all I'm saying is, okay. Like, I just got this like
How
horror.
did you do it?
And then I just did it. And then after I'd done that one, the other ones were not easier, that's a myth. And in fact, when we did the last one, I thought, oh God, thank God for that, because the adrenaline there's quite a lot of adrenaline spikes and that sort of thing. But I was so proud of myself. I don't know, other than I just kind of went for it, And then after that, my sister's friend, who she went to school with, when she was 18, she got a very rare spinal disease and was paralysed from the waist down. And she was trying to raise money to buy what they call an exoskeleton, which is like a device you strap onto yourself and people can walk again. But they're £80,000.
Wow.
Yeah. And so she'd been doing fundraising for like 8 or 9 months, and she said, I'm going to abseil down the Spinnaker Tower in Portsmouth, which is like 170 metres or something. Oh, no, is that right? Yeah, it's huge. It's really, really tall. And she was going to do it. She can't walk, so she was going to have a special harness, but she was going to do that. And she asked lots of people if we would also do it to help her raise money. And this comes down to another really excellent tool, actually, about trying to do things that might scare you, is sometimes it's easier when the goal is not about you. So if the goal must be bigger than you. So I said to my sister, if you do it, I'll do it, because she's petrified of heights as well. And she then said, yeah, I'm doing it. I was like, no, that means I have to do it. So we did that. It's about 18 months ago now. I basically abseiled down. I nearly had a little cry at the top. Like, it was not fun. But again, I kept thinking, if she can do it, she'll walk again. If she can do it, I can do it,
You say it's not fun, but you're saying it with a huge smile on your face right now.
It was funny because my sister and I, we did it, you could do it together. I mean, I was so proud of myself that I did it. I can't describe how scared of heights I still am a bit, but how much I was. And, we were both having little cries at the top before we set off, and we got the video, and then we decided that we would sing all the way down. So it's a really nice memory that I have with her, because we were singing like Bohemian Rhapsody and other sort of like and Bon Jovi and stuff, just to keep ourselves distracted from the fact that it was just horrible. But I would like to, I think I'd like to do it again and do it in a less scared way, like knowing I can do it now. So, yeah, I was very proud of myself for doing that. And we, again, raised a lot of money, and she's now got this device and she walks, which is great.
And what does happiness mean to you? What does happiness feel like?
It feels like peace. And I think there's many layers of that. But, you've talked about your authentic self. And when you get there, it's peace. No, it doesn't mean everything's perfect. It doesn't mean that crap won't still happen to you, but it does mean that that doesn't make you wrong, or that's not because you're bad, or that you don't need to do or have anything else in order to have peace. Because, most emotions, they don't, even happiness, like, it comes and goes and things like that. But definitely peace and the water, the sea. I love the ocean. That's why I spend so much of my time diving. And when I was diving after recovering from my third bout of depression, which is very severe, I remember saying it was like an active meditation. Your brain is so obsessed with taking all this colour and this incredible stuff that there's no space for other stuff. And I think there's a charity that work with ex-servicemen and women who have PTSD, and they take them diving because there's an article on the BBC, and one of the chaps said it's the only place where my mind is free of the trauma. And now my mind is not in trauma anymore, but certainly it's that real deep sense of peace that I have when I'm diving. That's my happy place.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. We're kind of like nearing the end, but not quite. So I've got a section sort of more about women, and then a section on advice, and then that's us just wrapping up to go. What perceptions of women do you think there are, and how do you think they match up to your reality?
Oh God, that's like an endless question. There's so many perceptions, so many. Many of them are not helpful. Problem with any sort of perception is that you immediately put some sort of label on it. And labels, I like to say, labels limit you. They limit me. They limit everybody. People, we like to label. We like to know what something is, so we put it in a box, But it really kind of limits people. Because your version of something or perception of a woman is not the same as mine, but it will still be caught up in a boundary of some sort. Years ago, housewife, for example, it's a label as opposed to just, this is Julie and she just is, it's like, well, she has to be a something. They do say, don't they, don't ask people, what do you do? They say it's kind of like you're defining somebody by, their role that they happen to be paid for or not. Which is why often women would reply, oh, I'm just a housewife, or I'm just a mum, or whatever. And of course that's, they're probably incredible people, everybody. Yeah, to the point about not asking people what they do, but asking people, hey, what are you working on at the moment? Gives the opportunity for somebody to talk about their hobby, not necessarily their job if they want, but we're sort of trained to think that way. Other perceptions of women, I don't know. I find the motherhood one really tricky because of my history. And when we were experiencing lots of miscarriages, people would always inquire much more of me than they would of my husband. Like, for example, when people would ask me, do you have kids? And I would say no. They'd be like, why not? Like, often that was the question. Or when are you going to have kids? Is one of my favourites. It's like a presumption. And clearly I wanted them. And, I'm still childless now. But it used to annoy my ex-husband because he would say, but nobody asks me. They just go, do you have kids? You say no, and they're like, okay, cool. And, there's been film stars who've talked about this before, and other famous people where, people ask them, oh, how do you juggle motherhood with blah? But they hardly ever ask men that. And also, that's not really great for men either. Like, if we're talking equality, which we all want, then we're assuming men like going off and leaving the kids and not getting a chance to play as active a role. And society here is not really set up for much shared, as much. I mean, I'm happy to say things are changing, but that's not great. I know loads of guys that would love to stay and be part-time, and we had some friends, a couple, and they have 2 children now, and when they had the one, they both went part-time and sort of crossed over so they could both parent the same amount and then still work. And for her, no questions. For him, oh, why are you doing that? Even from enlightened, their own friends, what do you do all day? But nobody ever asks a mum who's at home with a kid, what do you do all day?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's interesting because you'd kind of think that would be something that people would have asked like 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years ago, and maybe not so much now.
I think the problem is as well when you, like I say, you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, and it is important to seek out differing views and opinions and voices and perspectives, but when you surround yourself with people who are thinking in this way, a more, I would like to say, more enlightened way, and more sort of for equality and things like that. It's a surprise when you meet people that are not like that, but actually I think we need to realise that a vast amount of people still think in very, very traditional gender roles, or just gender itself, let alone gender roles and expectations and things like that. So, you know, you have the working mum. Like, does everyone say I'm a working dad? Like, I don't know. And it's so offensive to men too. You know, this stereotype of, oh, dad's got the baby, everything's going to be terrible. It's like, why? Men and women are very different. Like, people are different, but it doesn't make one better and one worse. I find that really odd.
Yeah, and I think you've also nailed it there by saying that people are different. That's something I always try and come back to when people say, oh yes, but men and women are different. And I'll be like, no, but people are different.
So, and especially now that, you know, again, we're more aware that some people don't identify as either of those, you know, traditional genders. So where does that leave them then? Like, you know, it's kind of, if this is for that gender and this is for this gender, well, what about if you don't think either of those are appropriate to
everybody
you?
else? Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
Do you see yourself represented in outdoors media, so either clothing or shows or films?
Well, again, and this isn't a good thing, I guess, is that, you know, I am a straight white woman, so there are more representations than other people who look different to me or who are different to me or identify different to me. But there's still woeful lack. I was interested, I was looking at a speaking agency's website the other day because I do some public speaking, and I was just, you know, doing a bit of research, and I went to the adventurers section, and I didn't total it up, but I bet you can guess what most of them look like, you know. And I think most of the people there are incredible people. Like, I'm not taking anything away from them as people, but straight white man, they all were almost exclusively. I think there was a couple of women. I think there was one person of colour. And don't tell me that there aren't other people out there doing stuff. I mean, Tough Girl podcast, hello. Like, you know, there's plenty of people. It's just their stories don't get asked enough, or people don't seek them out. They just lazily go for the thing that already is there.
And what impact do you think that has?
I think it's got a huge impact. Like, it's really, really difficult to imagine something for yourself if you can't see it when you're a little person, you know, or even if you're a grown-up person, but particularly in your developmental years. I remember having a disagreement with an ex-boyfriend once about representation. He was criticising Serena Williams for we were talking about role models, and he's like, oh, I don't think she's a good role model because, and talked about various behaviour. And I said, it's funny that, because I remember you reading John McEnroe's book and saying that he was a legend. He had bad behaviour too. I said, what you fail to appreciate is that no one is saying that outbursts here and there are, you know, I mean, it's natural part of being human, but we're not saying that's the best behaviour you can demonstrate. But actually, her commitment, her drive, her passion, there's a lot of amazing stuff that she's done. And I said, you are not a small black female child who's looking for someone that looks like them, you know, who's looking for a hero. You know, you're not, your heroes are everywhere, you know. And he was in the army, so it's like you're surrounded by them. This is they're there the whole time. You know, my best friend, the incredible and amazing Irene Moore, when Whitney Houston died, we were talking, and she said she felt incredibly sad because she said when she was growing up, she was almost the only person on the telly, or one of the first people that she saw that wasn't a white person and she could identify with. And it really brought it home to me how much representation matters. Yeah. They say you can't be what you can't see, right?
Yeah, completely. And from that, do you have any female role models?
My mum, I'm very, very lucky. She is an incredibly generous, incredibly kind, incredibly loving human being, and she's brought up 4 daughters, so I'm very lucky. I came from a very strong female household, and, you know, I'd like to say we're all decent humans. So she's done an incredible job, and you know, both her and my dad together. And, you know, she didn't grow up in a world where you could be anything you wanted to be either. You know, when I remember she became a teacher because she was like, well, there wasn't a lot of choice. So yeah, she has a lot of grace as well. and a lot of style. And yeah, so I'm really lucky. I was surrounded by strong women as I was growing up. And other role models, kind of, like I mentioned Pink, I think she's incredible. I think she's great. I'm very lucky that my friends are also, I would say, that are my role models. Like I mentioned Irene, who's just incredible. My best friend Mel, obviously, who's not here anymore, but the way she lived was just very inspiring. And my other friends, Catherine, who is mum to 3 incredible children, and she's now a children's counsellor, and she's incredible too. And then my friend Frances as well. Like I think they're all my role models.
Sounds like you've got a great team.
I do. I'm really lucky. I've got the best crew.
We are very nearly there. I've just got 2-ish more questions. What advice would you give to your younger self?
I don't know whether it would be different to I'd give to anybody, really. I was quite lucky in that my mum gave me some good advice when I didn't know what I wanted to be. Unlike some people, I didn't know where I wanted to go, what to take, if to go to uni or any of that. And she was saying to me when I was trying to choose my A-levels, I think, or GCSE, she was like, well, pick things that you enjoy or are good at, mainly. She said, because it's most likely you'll end up doing something in that area. And I think, oh, that's good. That was a good piece of advice. And linked to that, my advice for my younger self would be to be as much as possible, to find out who you are, what you love, what your passions are, and to put all your energies into them. You won't go wrong then. That you won't go anywhere that isn't right. And eliminate the word should as much as possible. If you find yourself saying I should be, then it's a sign that, as they say, you're shoulding all over yourself. And that probably has come from somebody else. Or society.
Is there a time when you didn't follow that advice?
Oh yeah, most of my life. Like most people, you know, I should go to university. I didn't go straight off. I went later, but after I'd taken time to figure out, I started work and, you know, I didn't like this and what will I do and all the rest of it. I should lose weight, I should look like this, I should want those things, I should stay married. You know, there's quite a lot of things, and they haven't caused me much joy. The thoughts, you know, regret is mostly pointless. You can learn from a mistake for sure, but it's done. Just make sure you do the learnings rather than sitting in like shame. That doesn't help you.
Thank you so much.
That's great. It's been a really, really lovely conversation, and really deep in a really good way, getting to the heart of what is important.
Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. I left Charlotte to cycle on to Petersfield, but with pouring rain and a broken bike, things didn't quite go to plan. I'll drop a link to where you can read all about it in the show notes. Charlotte's words of "I am enough" definitely helped me through, and I carried on to my next interview the following day. In the next episode, I interview Soraya, Ops Manager of X Expedition, an all-female sailing team, a climbing instructor, and having built her own bamboo bike, Soraya is an all-round lover of the outdoors. I couldn't have asked for a nicer or warmer person to talk to after a very shaky start, and I can't wait to share our conversation with you. If you've enjoyed this episode, please help me out by telling a friend and recommending someone else to listen. And don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time, keep on being extraordinary.